Welcome in, everybody, to the Fantasy Roundup for January the 10th, wild card week in the NFL. I'm Zach Ewing, along with Spencer the Guru Urquhart. We're here. I know fantasy season basically over, but there's still a little thing called daily fantasy. There's still some
Yep.
prop plays we can get into. We're going to wrap up the season, and I believe that Bucktown Rebel, our listener league champion, or at least it's complicated, but we're calling him the champion. I think he's going to stop by in the comments. He didn't want to come on the show, but he will stop by in the comments and tell us a little bit about his season and also how that prize was getting the tickets to Panther Saints, because I'm not exactly sure what all that entailed. So I guess we're going to find out. Um, but Spencer, we'll start with wrapping up the regular season and some MVPs. Uh, and as Uncle Big Nick says, there's best ball playoff contests, lots of stuff to get into.
Yeah,
Um,
playoff leagues. I'm in some playoff leagues.
yeah, so it'll be a lot of fun, and we'll talk about that as we go forward here with the NFL playoffs starting in just 4 days on Saturday. First and foremost, we are brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. Go to lsuposter.com and receive a commemorative 3-poster set for making a minimum $10 bet if you're a new user at Caesar Sportsbook. You can go to lsuposter.com for details. It can be those 3 posters shown. It can be any 3 posters. We got like 20 choices. You get to pick the 3 that you want. And also another public service announcement. Uncle Big Nick reminds us as well.
Oh
Thursday's
boy.
Bayou Bet Show
Oh
live at
boy.
4 p.m.
Oh boy.
Mr. Gabe Henderson and Mr. Spencer Urquhart will have some Georgia face paint. Spencer, why did you even get involved in that?
Yeah, I'll looking back on it. That was like so stupid of me. I should have just not gotten involved in that. That was not my fight. That was so stupid. Dumbest. That was my lowest low on value bets, I will admit. So I deserve to take the L. That was my own fault. I walked into the trap of Jim Derry's freaking bear trap. God dang it. I was so
Yeah, he
mad.
said everybody had to get involved, and I said, well, TCU wins. I'll find some frog stickers or something. But I really didn't think they were going to
Yeah.
win or cover. And now, clearly, no one could have expected a 58-point win, but I did think Georgia was ripe for a good performance. You throw in 3 turnovers from TCU, obviously about their worst performance of the season, and things snowballed quickly. Roy is here. Roy,
Oh, Bucktown.
correct me, Roy. Is it Steyer? Roy Steyer, who's Bucktown Rebel, who he was 13-1 in the regular season in the Listener League, and then I guess technically won the playoff championship. He was ahead by a point over Bama Fikes, who had Joe Mixon left. Roy was gracious enough. Roy Steer. I'm sorry. He was gracious enough to actually concede that championship. But this is one of those karma things. You put good things into the universe, like saying, "Hey, I concede. Bama Fikes, you go enjoy the game." Well, we couldn't get a hold of Bama Fikes to give him the tickets. So I came back to Roy on Friday and said, "Hey, if you want those Saints Panthers tickets, they're yours." He said yes. Roy, tell us about that, because I wasn't even exactly sure what they entail. You mentioned food service? Were you in a suite, or were you I think Caesar's Field level suite? Tell us what it was like, Saints Panthers on Sunday. I know unfortunately the Saints had nothing on the line in the game and they lost the game and everything, but still a pretty cool experience. And we're going to run that back next year on the fantasy run. If you get into the listener league, we'll have those sweet tickets for you, or tickets for you. And it was a field level suite, Roy
Man, that's
says. So
nice.
yeah, pretty cool. Food service, drink service, all that kind of stuff. You're on the field, but you still have access to a bathroom, TV, seating, all of that kind of stuff. So pretty cool deal there. And we'll try to do that again next year. It kind of depends, though. If the Saints aren't home the final week of the season, becomes very hard to do, just because the fantasy season has to end the week before that. But we'll come up with a good prize. And look at that, free drinks and food and a field pass for halftime. So it does not get
Nice.
a whole lot better than that. So if you're listening, Listener League next year, when we do signups in July and August, you got to sign up, because we're going to have some sort of a drawing or some sort of a contest to see who we can get in there with Spencer and myself. And Roy will be back as the defending champion, so we'll have 9 other spots to see who can win those. I don't know if we'll do tickets. I don't know. We'll have to figure out exactly how we do it if the Saints aren't home the final weekend. But pretty cool deal. So with that said, let's wrap up the 2022 fantasy season, Spencer. You picked MVPs at each spot. You also picked sleepers and busts at each spot. So we'll start with the good. We'll start with the MVPs. And at quarterback, you had to put a lot of draft capital into this guy, but it worked out pretty well.
Right, yeah, I went with Josh Allen because, I had him in some leagues and just, he lived up to the expectations. He even battled through the elbow injury that he picked up midseason and was still putting up elite numbers. So definitely had to shout him out there. Had him in a couple leagues, one of which I made it all the way. The other finished third. So, yeah, he's just, you know what you're getting there. Yeah, he had to pay up, but the production was quite nice.
Yeah, I mean, you see, he did have 14 interceptions and a lost fumble, 15 turnovers, a little bit high, but in fantasy, as we know, that doesn't hurt you too much. He still ended up with the most points, or I guess it was the second most points.
Yeah, Mahomes had the most.
Yeah, Mahomes had the most, but Allen had the second highest average points, 24.72, behind only Jalen Hurts, who obviously was hurt during the playoffs, so it didn't help you. So Josh Allen, obviously, you were in good shape if you had him as your quarterback. Roy says Hurts was the quarterback to have. He was until he was hurt during the playoffs, so it just didn't help you at that point.
Yeah, him and Burrow, as far as from a pure value perspective, like him and Burrow were like, they put up similar numbers to Allen and Mahomes, and you could get them a lot later. So just from a value standpoint, considering Hurts got hurt in the playoffs, probably Burrow, but then Burrow, was in the canceled game against the Bills. That's just such a muddy ending. But yeah, definitely those four: Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, and Burrow, all right up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there was a drop off, and then we'll get into the sleepers later. But young quarterback in Chicago was right there in the next tier. And you talk about value; he wasn't even drafted in most leagues, or you could have gotten him real late. So Justin Fields, we'll talk about him in a minute. Austin Eckler of the Chargers, your running back MVP, Spence.
Right, yeah, he was just so solid all year. Had it, which I would have had him in more leagues. I had him on one of my championship squads, helped carry me there, and yeah, just incredible year. Another double-digit touchdown season of over 1,500 yards from scrimmage. This year, almost was almost 1,800. He just killed it week after week, and just one of those guys that he's just got it. He's just one of those elite running backs that you know what you're getting. Hard to find. That's what makes guys like him so valuable. There's not many of them. So if you can get one of them on your fantasy team, chances are you're going to go pretty far.
I've got to question your on-the-fly math skills there because that's only 1637 there if you add the two together. But we'll let that slide. I should
Lafayette math for you.
I should note Austin Eckler. I didn't put this on here, but he also had 107 receptions. So just a total PPR monster. I mean, it used to be a big deal when a receiver went over 100 catches. Now we're talking about a running back going over 100 catches to go with those 1,600 plus all-purpose yards and all those touchdowns. Yeah, he was a beast, to be sure. And a little bit of strategy from our listener league champion Roy here says he's not waiting for a late round quarterback, tight end quarterback worth a higher pick. And if you get the right guy, look, if you hit on those picks, absolutely they are. Now, kind of a high risk, high reward. If you miss on those picks, you could be if you pick Darren Waller too high this year, for instance, you could end up in some trouble.
Right, yeah, or Mark Andrews. I would say, I'd agree with him for quarterback. Like most of the quarterbacks outside of Herbert that went really high panned out. But the tight ends outside of Kelsey, there just weren't a whole lot of reliable ones.
And quarterbacks too is a risk. One of these guys have all been reliable, but you're one injury away from, and that's the case in any position. But at quarterback now you're scrounging, and you wasted a third round pick on a guy too. So we'll see. I think the easiest pick you had for MVP was probably at wide receiver, Spencer.
Right, yeah, I had Justin Jefferson on two of my championship teams, and just even though he didn't really perform that week, he did so well prior to that I still had to put him. He led the league in receiving yards and just was just a beast all year. He had a couple off weeks, but just overall was just amazing. And it was one of those things like before the season, I had pegged him as my number one overall receiver. I know Cooper Kupp was right up there with him up until his injury, but Kevin O'Connell going over to Minnesota, he was a big part of that Rams system from last year that helped Cooper Kupp be, the league's leading receiver. And then that carried over to the Vikings, and Jefferson, as a result, was this year's leading receiver.
Yeah. Only damper on that season was a very poor showing for championship week. Only the one catch against the Packers there in week 17. And so if you rode Jefferson's coattails to get to the championship, you needed help from somewhere else to win the championship. The one league I had him on, I finished third, and I actually did win the third place game despite his poor performance. But yeah, he was a beast all year long. Roy's strategy again, he had Jefferson, Kelsey, and AJ Brown. That's a nice place to be.
Yep, 0 running back strategy, and it paid off. You know, it goes to show you don't have to take a running back early. I usually do, but going into next year, I'm definitely not boxing myself into that, you know, because there's a lot of times the receivers are just as good or better in PPR.
Yeah, I mean, zero RB or hero RB would be the other one. Just get one guy early, and then you go from there and just pick up some backups along the way. I think I did that in one league where I ended up with Dameon Pierce as my RB2, and it worked out really well, of course, until Pierce got hurt, and then I had Derrick Henry, and he got yanked for the championship game. Ended up finishing second in that league. So look, no strategy is completely fail safe. It's just not. And Roy says he did have
100%.
Fournette. Yeah, Fournette is his quarterback.
Yeah, McKinnon off waivers. Yeah, that was a huge one there. And yeah, Fournette was solid for most of the year. Rashad White kind of came on late and hurt his production. But yeah, McKinnon, that was a league winner. And yeah, Stevenson was very strong most of the year. So yeah, you can get by with not taking the running back super early.
Yeah, you hit on one late, and even if you don't, if you mix and match at RB2, if you're stacked at receiver, that makes up for that. So definitely different strategies that can work. And by the way, I was glad, Spencer, in our listener league, not that I was certainly not trying to lose and I wasn't rooting against you or anything. I found it very cool that it was two listeners who ended up in the final. You and I both had strong years. You finished fourth, I finished fifth. You got that last playoff spot and then bowed out in the semis. And so we had that championship week battle royale that, of course, it got muddied up by the Bills Bengals, but still a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, the Bama, man, where were you at, man? You lost out. I mean, that was great prize, but I'm glad Bucktown got to enjoy it because it sounds like it was a lot of fun out there. So yeah, next year's listener league should be even more lit. Hopefully, we can expand it to 12 teams, and yeah, it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Your tight end MVP, I might have a small bone to pick with you in this one, just trying to be different, I guess. But no Travis Kelce. You're going with Hawkinson.
Well, yeah, it's because I didn't have Kelsey in any league, so it's a bias. I mean, obviously Kelsey was the top tight end. There's no arguing that. But I'm gonna show Hawk some love here because I had him on one of my championship squads, and he just had so many big weeks, especially when he went to the Vikings. He really turned up the heat as far as showing that he was a true top 5 tight end. One of the few you could actually count on in a position like outside of Kelsey. It was like, who could you really depend on each week? But like Hawkinson emerged and became that guy at number 2 tight end, outscored the likes of Mark Andrews and George Kittle.
Yeah, and again, we talk about values. Travis Kelce was worth that second or third round pick. He was, but nobody else was, and people were drafting Darren Waller up there. They're drafting Mark Andrews up there, or close to as high. George Kittle, and they just didn't work out because of injuries or ineffectiveness. Kyle Pitts, I'll talk about him in a minute, but that was a big issue. So those are our MVPs, or those are Spencer's MVPs. And now we're going to go into some, we talk about values, and certainly value can win you a league almost more than an MVP can. Like Austin Eckler was a first round pick. Okay. Josh Allen, first or second round pick. Okay. It's very good to hit on your top picks. But the ones who win you leagues are these guys where you can get something out of basically either a real low round pick or out of nothing, out of a waiver wire pickup early in the season.
Right. Yeah, Justin Fields was a waiver wire pickup in most single QB leagues. I had him in the listener league off the waiver wire, and he carried me, because I was struggling to find a QB. I waited on QB, couldn't find anybody. I picked up Fields, and boom, problem solved. So he was definitely a league winner for a lot of people there. Ramondre Stevenson, as Bucktown said, you could get him in the mid rounds, and he put up a top 12 running back season. And then Chris Olave, another mid round receiver that panned out as a rookie, really nice year. And then Evan Ingram, the waiver wire guy at tight end. It was a really rough year for tight ends, but Ingram somehow managed to finish top 5. And what was like, I mean, a lot of people thought he would be okay in Jacksonville, but I don't think anyone expected a top 5 year.
No, no. And Roy pointing out too, Kenneth Walker, a nice sleeper pick as well. Had a
Yeah.
very nice year in Seattle. And there's others to add to that list, of course. Now we have some busts. These are guys who you're counting on them. You spent a lot of draft capital on them. Maybe you swung a trade for them early in the year. And if you had one of these guys, it was pretty tough to win.
Right. Yeah. Russ. Yeah. Broncos country. Let's ride. That ride was not too pleasant there. That was a really brutal year for Russ. JT, Jonathan Taylor, the number 1 overall pick, ended up busting, which is, I hate to say it, that's kind of the common trend most years. A lot of times the guy everyone hypes up to be number 1 doesn't pan out. It's hard to string together back-to-back elite seasons. So yeah, Jonathan Taylor, even when he was healthy, he wasn't that productive. Kind of like with Kyle Pitts. I mean, yeah, they battled injuries, ended up on IR, but it's not the reason they're on there. Is because when they were healthy, they just did not live up to the hype. And then Gabe Davis, a guy that a lot of people pegged as a breakout, including myself, to me, it was just like, it was obvious. Like, he's in a great offense. He's a clear-cut number 2. He's got a breakout, right? But nope, it was still mainly the Diggs show. And then it was like Dawson Knox, Isaiah McKenzie, the running backs. Like, no one really took over as like a dominant force opposite Diggs. And we all thought that would be Davis, and it just didn't happen.
And Roy points out DeAndre Swift, which
yeah, Swift was rough. Yeah,
he was all frustrating team. I don't know if he was a total bust, but just, I mean, the Lions wouldn't use him. They never used him on the goal line. He had 2 great weeks to start the year, and I thought, man, I really got something here. And then he got hurt, and when he came back, they were, oh, we're just going to ease him back into action. You know, okay, I'll bench him for a couple more weeks. He never got back into action. I don't know. And Kyler Murray, another good one. Like that guy was like 6th, 7th round pick territory, and obviously gave you nothing.
right. Yeah, he actually had a stretch there where he was fairly decent, but he was up and down, and then he ended up hurt. So yeah, overall a bust. But not, I feel like Kyler gets. Like, he's like a player that people either love him or hate him, and I feel like he's kind of in between. I don't think he's terrible, but I also don't think he's elite. Like, I feel like a lot of people are like all or nothing with him.
Yeah. It's some of this just it's even frustrating just talking about it, isn't it? Some of these guys, like you see the
Yeah,
potential,
Lamar
and they have these good
Jackson
games,
too.
and yeah, and that's another good one. Or I actually had him in a league where I was lucky enough to pick up Fields right before Lamar went out, and for a couple weeks there I had both of them, and I was, oh man, I could trade one of these guys, and then I thought, you know what, not going to trade them. Injuries happen, and that was the league I finished second in, so I was lucky that I held on to Fields there. That is our year in review. We got some sleepers, some busts, some MVPs, everything else. Jerry's here. Hey, Jerry.
Hey, Jerry, what's up, man?
We need to know what Jerry thinks about Sean Payton possibly going to the Cardinals. That might be a game changer for the New Orleans Saints offseason if the Cardinals cough up that number 3 pick in a deal. If y'all missed it, the news, you can check it out on bet.nola.com. Sean Payton is the betting favorite to go be the Arizona Cardinals' next head coach. He's still, it's like plus 200. So we're still not talking about odds on favorite. But listen, I think if that happens, that's a very, very good thing for the Saints. So Jerry says he agrees. Yeah, Kamara was disappointing. There's another one. Speaking of the Saints, Alvin Kamara disappointing for fantasy owners and Saints fans alike.
Yeah, it was kind of tough here for Kamara. He did a little better down the stretch because he would just get that call like that ugly volume, just getting a lot of that early down work. But man, I really hope next year that Saints to get a new offensive coordinator. To me, that's their number 1 offseason need, even more so than any personnel stuff. Like, before you worry about player personnel, get a new OC. Like, to me, it's so obvious. I hope they don't screw it up because, I mean, you've got to just scrap with the. I mean, Peyton's offense past couple of years, which I call this year, was an extension of Peyton's offense to me because Carmichael was a Peyton disciple. And, I mean, the game's changed, man. I mean, scrap that, start over, get the new quarterback, new OC, and hopefully Kamara, getting back to Kamara, hopefully he can bounce back next year. I know he'll probably get suspended, but when he's playing, get him out in space more, spread him out, spread the field out, get him in motion, get the get it flowing, man. Get the offense flowing. I mean, watching the Saints this year was so frustrating because it was so stagnant on
I can
offense.
feel your frustration. You're like falling out of the chair. You're so frustrated there.
Oh, it's awful to watch. I mean, it was just like every week it was like a trip to the dentist office. I mean, I kind of feel like I mean, it was just this, oh man, if we need change. We've got to get Kamara, like, because when he was at his best, he was out in space being used as a receiver. This year he was just used as like as Kevin Foote back in Lafayette put as a dump truck, like just running him up the middle. You got to get that guy out in space. He's still an explosive playmaker.
Yeah, Jerry says he thinks Sean Payton. I think most Saints fans think Sean Payton should go to Arizona for that draft
Oh,
pick.
I
The
sure hope
question
so.
question is, will Arizona do it, and will Sean Payton do it? You have to have three parties agreeing here. So we'll see. In the meantime, we'll turn our attention to the playoffs. You can play best ball, you can play playoff leagues, you can play DFS. I think, like DraftKings, FanDuel both have options where you can play just Saturday, just Sunday. You can combine Saturday and Sunday. You can combine all 6 games on the weekend. So check out their contests, different prizes, and things like that. Here's my DFS values for the weekend. I'm picking on that Giants-Vikings game, that Vikings defense, man. Any quarterback against that Vikings defense has done well. Even Nathan Peterman threw for some yards against the Vikings defense. Daniel Jones in a spot where the Giants are going to rely heavily on him could really have a nice day at 5,600. Chargers running defense, going to pick on them with Travis Etienne, 6,300. Tyler Lockett, I know the 49ers defense good, but Lockett went over 100 yards the first time Seattle played in San Francisco this year. He had a good day the second time they played San Francisco. And you got to figure Seattle at some point will find itself behind in that game and be chasing. And then at tight end, I went with Dalton Schultz of the Cowboys, Spencer.
For sure. Yeah, those guys could pop. I like, the Jaguars, Chargers. I like the Jags in this spot. As we see when we get to mine, I like Trevor Lawrence. But I see your point about the Chargers run defense. They're not too good. So I would think ETN could have a big day. And then, yeah, Daniel Jones, that could turn into a shootout, being in Minnesota, indoors and all that. Like, and he's somebody that's capable. I mean, he's kind of inconsistent, but it'd be the playoffs. I think the Giants will be ready to play. Brian Dable's a very good coach there. So, yeah, I could see those hitting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you picked on the Chargers defense as well as we get into your DFS values, but you went the other direction.
Right, yeah, going with a Jag stack here, Trevor Lawrence, Zay Jones, because I was looking through the slate and I didn't really see any shootouts really on the docket. I was kind of like, man, this is just a dull week. But then I started thinking, I was like, I mean, who are the quarterbacks in this matchup? Okay, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert. I know both of these teams have had decent defenses this year, and Trevor and Herbert haven't always popped off. But you got to think for the playoffs, so they're going to unleash their biggest strengths, which is these quarterbacks. I mean, you got these generational talents at quarterback. I mean, you got to unleash these guys. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is somebody he's had his moments, but he's been a little inconsistent. But I think this will be a week where he shows why he was the number 1 overall pick. And Zay Jones it seems to be the guy that you can rely on there, and also a very good value. I mean, Christian Kirk's obviously been reliable too, but at 4,300, Zay Jones much cheaper for a DFS standpoint. And then playoff Lenny, man, Leonard Fournette, Dallas's run defense.
Playoff Lenny.
Yep, going down the tubes, man. I mean, they got freaking ran all over by Washington's 3rd and 4th string running backs this past Sunday. That is not a good sign, man. Dallas might be in trouble, man. Brady and playoff Lenny, I think they could pull the upset potentially. And then Dawson Knox, just steady. He's steady. He gets decent amount of targets, always targeting in a red zone. He's just a steady presence there at tight end.
Absolutely. And I look, it may be a boring week. Sometimes it looks boring and it's not. I'm not super enthralled by any of the matchups. I will say that the lowest total on the slate, Seattle and San Francisco at 43. The highest is the Giants and Vikings at 48.5. So not a big range there, 5.5 point difference. But that Chargers Jaguars game you mentioned right underneath the highest, it's at 47.5. So, not a huge difference, but a small guy. Giants, Vikings, Chargers, Jaguars with the biggest totals. Here's the thing, Roy, about DFS. It is very up and down, and that's kind of the point. If you're going to have success in DFS, you're going to have to hit a big one at some point. Like, and that should drive your strategy. Don't play the game to, as they say, min cash. Get the last. You don't want to be okay. So let's say you're in a contest that pays out the top 500, and numbers 301 through 500 get. It was a $20 entry. They each get $40. Okay, if you get that, you're not going to turn it down. But you're not aiming to get $40 when you enter these contests. You're aiming to get $1,000. You're aiming to get $5,000. You're aiming to get the grand prize. Like, and because of that, you can't just necessarily pick what you think is the best value lineup. You have to maybe pick some guys that you don't think very many other people will pick. And then if they go off, that's when you hit it big. So that's what I would say for DFS. Yes, you want values because it allows you to get good players, but you want to have a lineup that's basically unique. And when there's tens of thousands of entries in a contest, it's hard to be unique or close to unique with your lineup. And so you have to kind of be willing to zig when others zag.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I'm new to DFS too. I've always been more of a season-long fantasy player, But yeah, DFS, it's a tricky thing, and I'm gonna have to dabble in it more next year because there's definitely money to be made with it. But yeah, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, one of the most important things, value is very important, and that's what we do. But ownership is also important. And there are websites that will track that for you and tell you, okay, we project this player to be such and such a percent owned. Not to say you can't own anybody who's a high percentage, but you don't want to line up full of those guys. Or else even if you do hit the perfect lineup, you're going to be sharing it with 100 other people. It doesn't do you any good. You need to have that leverage of having your unique lineup. There's all sorts of different contests as well, as Roy asked. And this is a good time to talk about this. I'm glad Roy's asking the questions because in the playoffs, that's one of your main options is this DFS opportunity. So there's what's called double up contests, where basically half of the field doubles up their money. It doesn't matter if you finish first or you finish right before the 50% mark, you get double your money. And if you finish in the second half, you get nothing. There's also single entry contests where each player is only allowed to put in one entry, and that can actually help you get leverage as well. I like single entry contests because the main contests, the ones that they call the milli makers, where you're going to make $1 million if you win top prize, the tricky part about those is each individual player can put in 20 lineups, sometimes 100 lineups. They could, and they're willing to do that. And the entry may be $100. And some of these guys are big fish and will put in $10,000 every week and have 100 lineups at $100 each. And it is extremely difficult to beat out someone who has 100 lineups and knows what they're doing. And so I shy away, even though they're big prizes, you shy away from those because even if you're hitting perfect lineups, it becomes very difficult to beat somebody who's got 20 lineups and 30 lineups and 50 lineups and 100 lineups in and knows what they're doing. Whereas in the single entry, even if you're up against somebody who knows what he's doing, well, maybe I know what I'm doing and we each get one entry and now it's an even playing field.
Right. Yeah. To me, that's the way to go. Yeah. Do the single entries. Yeah. These ones, I mean, unless you're like one of the sharpest of sharps, it's like, it's just to me, it's just not worth your time to like do like, it's like, yeah, I mean, when I play something, I like to try to feel like I have fairly decent odds. If the odds are like way against me, I just don't even like to waste my time.
Yeah.
Even if the payoff's big.
It's not, yeah, the payoff is big, but it's not even it's not even the time or the odds. You also have to stake more. You have to put in more money, which means you lose more. And look, I mean, I think we're all for responsible gambling. Never go into these things throwing a whole bunch of money at a big prize to the point where you feel uncomfortable. And that's why single entries, there's 3 max where each person gets a max of 3 entries. That's more doable. Okay, let's say each one of those entries is $10 or $20. All right, you spent 30 or $60. Now we're talking. Now you're at a point where you could still get some return on that investment without having to beat the sharpest guys in the industry who have 100 entries in there. So that's the kind of contest that I prefer, and that's what I would look for. So I think that'll do it for us, unless there's more questions. But 20 max entries a lot. Roy, you're right. That's why I look for those 3 max or those single entries. Just I don't like to have a bunch of money on the line. It makes me nervous. And I won a lot of money in Survivor this year, but that's only a $20 entry. So as far as risking my own money, not much of it. So that'll do it. We'll be back next week. We're going to stay with you all the way through the playoffs every Tuesday at 2 p.m. as we get closer to, we'll probably take the Pro Bowl week off actually, but as we get closer to the Super Bowl, we'll talk more player props for that week's games as they start to come out earlier in the week, and we'll do DFS and answer y'all's questions.
Yep, sounds good. Sounds good. Congrats to everyone that won their season-long title. It was rough. I know it, all the craziness, but we got through it, so congrats to everyone that pushed through with a title, including you, Roy. Good job, man.
Yeah, Roy, congratulations to you, and I'm glad you enjoyed those tickets. Listen up for that Listener League next year, starting probably late July, early August, when we start the Fantasy Roundup back as a weekly show. We will announce how you enter to get in that thing. We'll announce what the prize is. Saints schedule will have part to do with that. Maybe we have to pivot to Pelicans tickets or something like that, which are also obviously in demand. So we will figure something out. Caesars Sportsbook, our sponsor, helps us out with that prize, and we will roll from there. So for Spencer the Guru, I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks for watching the Fantasy Roundup.